Alex, would you like to come and join me up here? So, welcome, Dr. Alex Kenyon.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, we're being asked to just move around, just very slightly. That's right. We're kind of together on this, so that's all good. So, if Martin is happy at the back, he is. That's cool. Go. It's so good when you have to work in concert with these people, I think, because otherwise you just don't get that experience that would be really fulfilling otherwise. So, thank you, Martin. Alex, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and also tell me a little bit about some of the research that you've been doing. I know you've got a very special offer for for the delegates if they get to you within a certain time frame.
Yes.
So let's start there, and then we will have a chat, and we'll pick on the audience. Well, we won't pick on them, but we're volunteer. If they've got questions about the future of events, that'll be fabulous. So. Okay. Yeah, I'll pass to you now.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. So my name's Dr Alexandra Kenyon, and I'm from Leeds Metropolitan University. And I've been doing some research with a colleague of mine, Jackie Mulligan, and other people from our team about the future of events. We were commissioned by MPI, and we were actually sponsored by PSAV, Jamara, and Omni Hotels. And I think the big question on everybody's lips, really, well, what are the big issues that's going to affect our industry in the future? And it's a question that maybe you can tweet your answer or click an answer in your mind now. There's something that you think is going to be a big issue in the future. What would it be?
So what's the
big one?
What's your big issue? Look at this, they're typing on their pads already, so that's fantastic. So the question, and you guys at home and in your office, what is the big issue that you see coming up? All we want to know is, what is it, a word? Do you just want a word?
One word.
Just one word. That's all Alex is after, just one word.
What will affect you the most? What would you say? Okay, prices.
So prices coming up.
Yeah, budgets, price. More for less. Okay. Extra value. Good value. Yeah. 3 words is fine. More for less. That's fine. That's fine. Well, the research that we did, we asked the very same question of everybody. What big issues do you think will happen to you in the future? And we went outside our industry as well as inside our industry, because sometimes we're quite focused, aren't we? We're focused people. We want to know what's going on. We want to know what the future might bring, but we tend to be a bit narrow, perhaps, in our thinking. So we went outside our industry as well and spoke to population experts, social media experts, gaming technologists, economists, you name it. We had a chat with all of them. And I was chatting with people around the world. Sometimes they would be in America, so I'm in my pajamas because it's daytime there, but I'm supposed to be asleep. But nevertheless, it's important to get the views from outside our industry. So when we did that and we looked at it in what the meetings industry think the future will be, it was economics and technology. Those were the big things that were going to happen in the future. Nevertheless, when we went outside our industry, it was a different thing. They said people. People will make decisions of whether they come or they won't come. Economics was obviously still important, because there's been a world economic blip, really, I guess. But it affected us a lot. Now, it didn't affect every single country in the world. However, because we're dealing with multinational companies, then obviously everybody was affected in some way or another because of the economic crisis that was occurring. However, there was a lot more to it than that. Businesses in the future will have to think about keeping people safe and secure, because if people are afraid to step out of their own environment, their own country, then that's not good for us in our businesses. And there's political instability, there's massive climate changes going on, there's social changes, there's cultural changes, and when you hear all of these changes, it's actually already been known, even though we're only in 2014, that this decade is the turbulent teens, because there's turbulence everywhere in terms of geopolitics, social changes, etc., etc. Yeah. So these are the things that we've been discussing and investigating.
The turbulent teens.
The turbulent teens.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great little soundbite for all of those people on social media.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, brilliant.
I love that kind of thing, yes. Yeah, and one of the things that which we have actually found also is because of all of this turbulence, there's somebody like my mother. You imagine my mother, she thinks, Alex, where are you going? Are you going on your own?
She could be watching right now.
She could be watching, yes. Are you going on your own? How are you going to get from the airport to the hotel? Who's going to look after you when you're there? Who's going to take you from the hotel then to the convention centre? Don't spend anything online. Don't use your Visa card because somebody will steal your identity.
Yep.
And do you know where the British Embassy is in case you get lost? These are the questions my mum asks me all the time. But what she actually is my conscience, because everybody may be thinking like this. Some people are more risk takers than others. Some people are very cautious. And these were the things that we were finding in our research, that there's this extreme. But as business people in the events industry, we have to make sure that people will feel safe, they will know where to go, they will already be registered with their embassy because we know where everybody's coming from, so we should have some risk assessment documents with the embassies ready in case, this person gets lost, can't find something, loses their passport, anything like that. Just gentle things like that are important.
All about the people.
Yeah, so these are the things. The people will come or they won't come, depending if they feel safe.
Okay, so we have issues on price.
Okay.
And then we have issues on people. So,
Yes,
yeah. It's becoming even trickier for people in the events world.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that is probably important is like what we're doing right now. Many people are going to live in urban cities. It's called the borderless countries now, because we don't just stay within our own country. We don't just stay in our own cities. There will be a generation in the future that will never have a desk permanent in an office of their own. There'll be a generation of hot deskers or home workers, because there'll be organisations where 80% of their workforce could well be sat at home and working from their computers in that way. I'm lucky, I get a couple of days a week, often working at home if I'm doing a big research project. And I need that space and quiet sometimes, because how much I love my colleagues and my friends, I do not want them necessarily sort of just saying, Alex, can you just do... so it's really good to take that moment aside. But that's not just me. There are other people that work permanently at home. So what do we do with virtual meetings such as this to engage with an organisation that's a multinational organisation that has 80% of their workforce in different places? And obviously the first question, which was something that where Paul and I were talking about this morning, is what do we do with the time zone situation?
Yeah, the time zone's been a bit of a challenge for this.
It does. It has. And my husband and I were watching a film just the other day, and it was, I can't remember the name of the film because we chatted so much about this one particular issue, which was Zulu time. When you're in a submarine, which was what the film was about, you have to have a Zulu time. And the Zulu time is the same time, and it just tracks no matter where you are. So you never go through a time zone in a submarine, which you might do a lot when you're traveling for several months and so on. So there's got to be something about how do we decide what time we are going to meet, what is useful for everybody, how can everybody be engaged, and how do we tell them about this? Just the other day also, it sounds as though we watch TV a lot, actually. But maybe we just noticed
information gathering. Yeah.
The football was on, so it was. I can't remember now. Which it was Manchester United versus somebody.
Yeah.
Please forgive me, all Manchester United fans around the world. But they had a great score in the end. It was 3-0, so they did really, really well. But the thing was, we were watching. Sorry. West Ham, thank you very much.
West Ham, Manchester United, right.
So, but whilst we were watching it, because we wanted to see when it was on the TV, and so we were trying to work out, well, it's 4 hours in England, and now it's, this. However, on the television screen, it said Abu Dhabi time, it's on at this time, GMT, this one. And so we thought then, that should happen more often, because it's really useful for us in meetings and events, that if we're going to do virtual meetings like this, then we couldn't possibly do that if we were a multinational company and we've got satellite offices in 10 countries around the world, because your screen would be like this and it would go on forever. But nevertheless, there perhaps ought to be some sort of like standard time in the future that we could all work with, because that does cause a little bit of chaos. So I quite fancy the Zulu time.
Oh, I think hearing about that would have been perfect for this event, because yesterday we moved, our first speaker was in New Zealand. So we had Josh from New Zealand first thing in the morning, which for him was the end of his Monday. And then we switched across to Vancouver, and we had a difference of 11 hours behind. Well, there was a 20-hour time difference, and we were in the middle here in Abu Dhabi. So when I was discussing this with Martin, what did we put on the viewing page for people looking at the event, when to join? And we came to the conclusion that we could only, I decided to put down just Abu Dhabi time, get everybody to come to that. Because if I put up 3 or 4 others, States, Europe, UK, where do you end? Like you were saying, you'd be all across that page.
Yes.
So I'd love Zulu time and make these events a lot easier.
Yes, well, we'd know where we were working to. The other interesting thing also that came out from our research was about cultural differences, and naturally that's always a big issue. And we know how effective on our industry the BRIC countries, such as the Brazil, Russia and China, and how important those countries have been on our businesses, because it's exciting that new people are coming to our events, but it's also exciting there's new opportunities for destinations elsewhere. Now, the next generation of the superpowers are going to be, Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, Turkey. Those are the next superpowers. And the reason why they're going to be the next superpowers is they have a fantastic internal demographics, because there are more people, they've got lots of people in their country already, but there's more people being born in that country, and there's therefore more people working than not working, unlike some of the Western countries where, because of the low fertility and the low mortality rates, then we have more people not working than working. So therefore, these are going to be the superpowers of the future, because they will have a higher GDP in the future, and it's not going to be that long. So
I was just going to ask, how long are you looking for? I think that spelled mint. Did that spell mint?
Yes,
Was that right?
Mint's
so
the new brick.
we're moving from brick to mint.
Yeah.
But when you say in the future they're going to be coming through, what is that? 10 years time, 20 years time?
Well, normally the statistics tend to look towards 2050 on the United Nations statistics, in terms of over the last 50 years the older population has grown, tripled 3 times. And in the next 50 years, it's going to triple again. So that means by 2050, there will be more over 60s in the world than there are under 16s. And that has a big influence on the world's population, because generations want different things. They certainly have different needs here in our industry, for definite. But they have different ways of communicating. They have different ways of, just different needs here at events and elsewhere. So we have to kind of think about the older population a lot more, because once you get to the age of 50, apparently...
when you get to 50...
when you get to 50, then your spend opportunities goes up exponentially in comparison with where it has been, because there's changes in your family commitments, there's changes in your financial commitments, and your sort of, hopefully your employment is really good and it's a really good peak, and so all of those things. So your actual value to businesses goes up exponentially, and so that's great. Yeah. So it's all going to happen over the next 50 years. by 2050.
By 2050,
this enormous change.
36 years time.
So it's not long. It's not long.
I mean, it can be quite tricky, can't it, for event planners to be able to deal with different cultures in the audience, and how that might affect their ability to become engaged in certain activities, but also all those different age ranges now. If we've got about 4 different generations all in the same place, then how do we cope with that as well? Yeah. I mean, any ideas from the audience? Any experiences of any kind of, do we just target specifically do we find events are going to be just nailed down to this is a certain age range, this is a certain culture, or do you think that we are going to get more and more widespread in terms of mixing everybody together across, and those will become normal events?
Yeah.
Or
Well, by 2050, based on the numbering, if you're keeping up with the numbering situation, there will be 5 generations in one room. So therefore, we've got the baby boomers, we've got Generation X, Generation Y, millennials, and it won't be long before we have the next, whatever we call them. Whether they are Generation X or Z rather, or whether they're going to be called, I want to call them thumbers, because they're so busy.
Thumbers.
The
Right,
thumbing
okay.
generation, because we're also busy on our phones in that way. But we'll see what happens. So if you've got 5 generations in one room, you have to satisfy the needs of all of those generations, and that can be quite difficult. The Generation Y are called "What's in it for me" generation, and they have needs at conferences like ours here today, and they want concise content that's specific and personalised to them.
Yeah.
They look at their phone every 9 minutes, not whilst they're sleeping, but I'll bet you they do look if they happen to wake up in the middle of the night and want to drink water.
Every 9 minutes.
They will be looking. And so these are the things that they are interested in. They want some personal engagement, but not quite as much as the older generations, the Generation X, which are a little bit more interested in co-creation with experts. This is what our research has found.
Right.
Getting involved. They've got that need for, to look somebody in the eye and feel comfortable with that. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier, Paul, was about having people remotely.
Yeah.
And the words that we kind of hear are, to go forward, you have to think back. Once upon a time, when somebody phoned you and you were at a social engagement, like at a restaurant, or you were maybe just having a coffee with somebody, you would step away from the table and answer the phone. Okay? And you would just, sorry, I just need to get the phone, and you go away. It's not like that now. It's all about people will join the conversation in which you're in from afar. So they join the conversation. They're not remote anymore. They just join the conversation. So they're either sending you a photograph, sending you a text, and you all share this as well. And if you have a phone call, they just join that. You put them on loudspeaker and everybody's involved. So I kind of wonder that they will ever be remote people.
Yeah.
There will always be people that are joining the conversation. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the benefit of the online folk, because we didn't have a mic for Megan, she was just saying. She was just saying that social media has had a huge impact on the way that events are conducted, marketed, what's going on in events. I mean, Megan was basically making the point that we've got people in the audience right now that are tweeting away and doing things, and I know they're tweeting because I can see it. I can see it on the iPad up here. But interesting to your point of the people want content specifically for them. There are speakers I know that get really upset if anybody is doing what you guys are doing. They want you to be absolutely focused on the task of learning whatever the information is. The older generation, well, maybe some of the oldest, I can't say that though, because some speakers are really, like Alan Stevens yesterday, he's great, he does all of this stuff, he tweets out, but it's interesting when you have speakers that are believing that just because people are on their devices, they're not taking anything on board. I think that's another kind of thing to come over, because if you took the devices away and you said, right, there's a notebook and there's a pencil, we wouldn't mind, the speaker probably wouldn't mind them scribbling, but they might be doing their shopping list. So it's interesting how a device becomes almost like an obstacle and also like a great change thing, but in our minds, we're not quite there, are we?
No.
Do you want the microphone?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. It's ridiculous as well if you think about this. Life is on the mobile. And when you really think about this, we talk about big data and how important big data is to us. The big data comes from your phone. So if you imagine your phone is having deep conversations with a multiple of computers somewhere, because there's somebody in the back office doing the analytics and checking what's being said. So these phones here and yours at home are having deep conversations with a computer all over the world. And because of these deep conversations, these computers know who you are, they know how old you are, they know if you're male or female, they know where your friends are, they know you're here, but they know where you live, they know what music you like, they know how you feel, because you say so in your tweets and other things. So they'll be looking at all of these things. So your phone knows a lot more about you than your friends do. Because your friends know you as a friend, your business colleagues know you as a business person, and maybe the two do not swap quite so much. But your mobile phone tells these computers, wherever they are in the world, deep conversations, and they know an awful lot about you. And it's important as event planners to embrace this and hire people that do the analytics. And a really lovely example is KLM. KLM had a follower on Twitter. Yeah. The lady was a runner, so she'd be saying, I'm going out running, I'm doing my running, and I'm whatever. And then they realized, because of her social engagement online, that she was going to Rome on KLM. And she was going to run in Rome and run around the city. So they have what's called a surprise campaign. So KLM somewhere have got the deep data about this one person. They know she runs, they know she's going to Rome, they know that she's on the plane, they know what plane she's on.
That sounds scary to me. That sounds very scary.
So they presented her with a wristband to monitor. You're running. I don't know it runs, so I don't know what it monitors, but I'm sure it's something to do with heart rate and calories or something along those lines. And she was presented that just because of her social media activity. Yeah. Can we do that in the events industry? Should we do that? Will people share that much with us? They do already. But some people are a little afraid about the security of data. Remember my mother, my social conscience, if you do things online, somebody's going to steal your identity. So I guess as meeting planners, we have to think of the both sides of things. We want their data, so if we can give them something in return for that, they would like it, because that's your first answer here, isn't it? More for less.
Yeah.
And similarly, we need to also ensure that there's some little security emblems somewhere, the little padlock somewhere, all of those kind of things that people will know they're not sharing their data with everybody.
Well, you were saying as well in our preview conversation about KLM and how they're doing this kind of, is it meet and seat, where you can kind of choose where you want to sit on a flight, depending on the preferences of other people through their social medias, which to me again sounds a little bit too scary. Sometimes I just want to sit on a flight and do nothing. I just want to sit there and not engage with anybody. So,
but if Mr. Google was on that plane, I'd want to sit next to him, for definite. If I could find that was him, I would sit there. If David Beck was on the plane, I'm sitting next to him.
He's driving. He's probably. Yeah.
You know, these
he's got
are
his
the
own
people.
plane.
So if you were on a 12-hour flight and you wanted someone to talk to, Mr. Google's interesting. David Beckham's very interesting. Yeah. And selfies for sure.
Yeah. What do you?
The piece about mobile and all that thing and how you construct events, to what extent are you then mindful during a presentation you've got to allow for that? Because, you know, if everything that you're saying can be distilled down into a 140-character tweet that is then shared, you know, to what extent is a half-an-hour presentation being, sort of the context is being lost? And on the second part of that is, what actually about social media is, what it has actually fueled is a total and utter egocentricity of the tweeter. So your presentation today isn't about you, it's about how that has then been translated by the journalist in the room or the delegate in the room who's then tweeting out to their followers. It's almost as if they're now the messenger, not you. Yeah. So there's this kind of this weird, if I'm tweeting out this particular presentation, I'm telling my followers as some kind of like, oh, well, this has just happened. So it's no longer about you, you're now, the message has now been sort of handed over to somebody else to broadcast. Yes. So I was just wondering about how that then changes, how you present, the way you present, the length of your presentation, natural gaps, anything like that. Is that something that we really have to take into consideration?
Yeah. We also have another.
I disagree with that. The only reason is that I think that if your content is interesting enough that they want to share it. I agree that some people could say, hey, look what I'm sending you, but I think it's more about, wow, you had such a great presentation. I've got these nuggets. Like personally, I do find things like very interesting and I want to share it with people and say, wow, you really should know about this. This is really hot. Like now, get online, tune in. There's some really great conversations going on. So I would look at it from that respect, but it'd be interesting to see what you have to say.
Does the presenter have to notify that content? The design for the social media is still something you want to know. Do you want to take this for the... We're going to have a debate now, aren't we? Okay, you go. You guys,
Yes.
you guys can leave. We'll carry on.
But isn't that the best thing? What you have just done a live version of
absolutely.
what's happening on Twitter,
Yeah.
what's happening on Facebook, of course, and what happens just generally. And it's about spreading the word of mouth, and you're having a live conversation with each other, but that could also be happening on Twitter, Facebook, happens on Facebook loads of times when you're talking about some exciting event to do. I think, in a way, there is the notions about, especially with the younger generation, with the generation millennials and the generation Y, they do have it seems from the research, they seem to have the ability to be able to be on 3 or 4 platforms at once and still be engaged. And I know as a lecturer as well, I kind of have no frustration with people engaging with their computers and their laptops up. Because if they, again, find something interesting, take something away, there's always been a lot of research. If you listen for an hour, you will only probably remember 5 to 10% of what's been said. So if somebody tweets something, then because of your way you learn by listening, writing, doing. These are the ways that you learn about things. So if they listen, write something, and read it afterwards, then they've actually learnt 3 times, and that's probably better than just the old-fashioned way of listening.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, is there any research in terms of like attention deficit, because they are on multiple platforms, it is a split second here and there, in terms of the deep learning and understanding, is that going to be a decline? And I appreciate what you were saying is like, do you actually then do, here's your key little nuggets for it, and that's what they're interested in, or do you carry on and get, like, what is the research on that in terms of the understanding of the deeper level of what they're actually getting out of it?
I wish I had a 90%.
Maybe that could be another question.
That's another question for sure. As a lecturer over the years, I haven't found any decline in the level of student engagement and the work that they produce. I actually think it's a little bit harder, because when I do research, I probably spend about a day and a half getting journal articles, getting books, looking at chapters, reading things, because there is so much out there. So I think it's less difficult to be a surface learner now, because there's so much there. So you probably read more, perhaps not as deeply, but, you know, so by the time you've read 20 things about the same thing, it's in there. And so I haven't seen a decline for sure in the attention. No. I know that's anecdotal. Oh yes. Oh yes. Graduates.
Sorry, the question was like, you know, with social media and with instant response to anything you're saying, and with access to, you know, the internet and all of its, you know, infinitesimal amount of resource. Yes. Are you finding now that you know, you're a lecturer at university, whether students or people at events like this are much more ready to challenge what you're saying, and are much more confident in challenging, and have a much more of a ready well of information with which to challenge you? So in a sense, the lecture has moved from being, I'm telling you what you need to know, to I'm the starting point of a conversation.
Yeah, I like the idea of calling it the starting point of a conversation. I think that's a lovely expression. I will definitely use that. I will tweet that later for sure. What we cannot do is, which we did to begin with, when there's lots more out there, social media, YouTube videos, even lectures from other organisations, TED Talks, anything like that, there's no way you can include that within your lectures because that's free. Students pay a lot of money to come to our universities. So if you start bringing in a lot of free stuff, they get annoyed about that because they can see that in their own time. So yes, direct them to those things, but we have to do a different kind of job than we used to do, I think, because of that. And I'm not saying it's harder for us because it's more enjoyable because we all like to learn something new every day, but you can't just use free stuff because why ever would a student pay high fees if all you're giving them is free stuff from somewhere else and not my engagement?
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I think the questions, I mean, it's great. We wanted questions. We asked for those at the start of the session and at the start of yesterday as well, because this is all about stimulating debate. So how do people get hold of you? Because I'm sure there's more questions to come and from you guys as well. What's the best way to get hold of you and ask those questions? And my second question after that is your offer. You had an offer that you want to promote. So, and then we're going to need to close because Tim Chapman will be coming on next. And he's, do stay with us, of course, because he's talking about the future of hybrid events and what he sees coming around the corner. And it's exactly the kind of thing that we can keep that future theme rolling this morning. So best way of keeping questions, contact with you, what would that be?
I'm on Twitter, so it would be Alex J. Kenyon. I'm also email, which I still hold on to. I hold on to all my gadgets. I don't have a video recorder anymore, but we do have quite a lot of other tech at home. But I'm also a.kenyon at leedsmet.ac.uk. So that's my business email, so I'd be delighted to engage in any way in that way with you. And the research that I have been telling you about today came, as I said at the beginning, through MPI. And so I have we will have to send it out perhaps to those people that are engaged here because there's a special code.
They're very engaged. This audience is brilliantly engaged, so it's, I think they deserve it as well. So you would go up to the website with MPI and I would give you a code, then you can download the Future of Meetings white paper that we have done. But also we would like you to join MPI's LinkedIn conversation Future of Meetings because we're quite busy on there as well. Yeah, no, that's great. And if the online folks want to follow that through with you, they can do exactly the same. Contact you and say, look, really enjoyed the session. Of course they would. And basically just then get those details from you. So that is brilliant. Okay. Well, lots of food for thought, I think.
Yeah, I hope so.
So that's been really cool. And on behalf of Event Camp Middle East 2014, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Alexandra Kenyon, for being with us today, live from GIBTM in Abu Dhabi National Exhibition Centre, in the middle of the trade show, trying out some new ideas, coming forwards with some different discussion, and really thinking about the future of the events industry and how we can all play a role to improve that for the success of business and organisations everywhere. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Alex, would you like to come and join me up here? So, welcome, Dr. Alex Kenyon.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, we're being asked to just move around, very slightly. That's right. We're kind of together on this, so that's all good. So, if Martin is happy at the back, he is. That's cool. It's so good when you have to work in concert with these people, I think, because otherwise you just don't get that experience that would be really fulfilling otherwise. So, thank you, Martin. Alex, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and also tell me a little bit about some of the research that you've been doing. I know you've got a very special offer for for the delegates if they get to you within a certain time frame.
Yes.
So let's start there, and then we will have a chat, and we'll pick on the audience. Well, we won't pick on them, but we're volunteer. If they've got questions about the future of events, that'll be fabulous. So,
it in what the meetings industry think the future will be. It was economics and technology. Those were the things, the big things that were going to happen in the future. Nevertheless, when we went outside our industry, it was a different thing. They said people. People will make decisions of whether they come or they won't come. Economics was obviously still important because there's been a world economic blip, really, I guess. But it affected us a lot. Now, it didn't affect every single country in the world. However, because we're dealing with multinational companies, then obviously everybody was affected in some way or another because of the economic crisis that was occurring. However, there was a lot more to it than that. Businesses in the future will have to think about keeping people safe and secure, because if people are afraid to step out of their own environment, their own country, then that's not good for us in our businesses. And there's political instability, there's massive climate changes going on, there's social What would you say? Okay, yeah, prices.
So price is coming up.
Yeah, budgets, price. More for less. Okay. Extra value. Good value. Yeah. 3 words is fine. More for less. That's fine. That's fine. Well, the research that we did, we asked the very same question of everybody. What big issues do you think will happen to you in the future? And we went outside our industry as well as inside our industry, because sometimes we're quite focused, aren't we? We're focused people. We want to know what's going on. We want to know what the future might bring, but we tend to be a bit narrow, perhaps, in our thinking. So we went outside our industry as well and spoke to population experts, social media experts, gaming technologists, economists, you name it. We had a chat with all of them. And I was chatting with people around the world. Sometimes they would be in America, so I'm in my pajamas because it's daytime there, but I'm supposed to be asleep. But nevertheless, it's important to get the views from outside our industry. So when we did that and we looked at changes, there's cultural changes, and when you hear all of these changes, there's changes, it's actually already been known, even though we're only in 2014, that this decade is the turbulent teens, because there's turbulence everywhere in terms of geopolitics, social changes, etc., etc. So these are the things that we've been discussing and investigating.
The turbulent teens.
The turbulent teens.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great little soundbite for all of those people on social media.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
I love that kind of thing, yes. Yeah, and one of the things that which we have actually found also is because of all of this turbulence, there's somebody like my mother. You imagine my mother, she thinks, Alex, where are you going? Are you going on your own?
She could be watching right now.
She could be watching, yes. Are you going on your own? How are you going to get from the airport to the hotel? Who's going to look after you when you're there? Who's going to take you from the hotel then to the convention centre? Don't spend anything online. Don't use your Visa card because somebody will steal.
Yeah, I'll pass to you now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Paul. So my name's Dr Alexandra Kenyon, and I'm from Leeds Metropolitan University. And I've been doing some research with a colleague of mine, Jackie Mulligan, and other people from our team about the future of events. We were commissioned by MPI, and we were actually sponsored by PSAV, Jamara, and Omni Hotels. And I think the big question on everybody's lips, really, well, what are the big issues that's going to affect our industry in the future? And it's a question that maybe you can tweet your answer and or click an answer in your mind now. There's something that you think is going to be a big issue in the future. What would it be?
So what's your
What's the big one?
What's your big issue? Look at this, they're typing on their pads already, so that's fantastic. So the question, and you guys at home and in your office, what is the big issue that you see coming up? All we want to know is, what is it, a word? Do you just want a
just
word?
One word.
Just one word. That's all Alex is after, just one word.
What will affect you the most?